2 Years Before the Mast by Richard Henry Dana, or Dana, I'm not sure. This is one of the Harvard classics. The publishers put out a bunch of these books, Harvard classics, with the idea that if you read every one of them, you would have a good liberal arts education. I don't know if that's true, but I have a number of them. I don't have the whole 5-foot shelf that they recommend, but this one I have, and it's called, well, it covers two things that Richard Henry Dana wrote. He covers 2 Years Before the Mast and 24 Years After, which I didn't read, but I read 2 Years Before the Mast. This story, well, it's not a story, it's a nonfiction account written in the 1800s about this man who was studying, I believe at Harvard, but he had eye troubles, and the doctors recommended that he took a break from studying. So he did something that most people wouldn't do, which is that he took a job as a common sailor on a merchant vessel, which back in those days would have been a sailing ship. 2 years before the mast, it means in front of the mast. The officers were behind the mast. He was one of the working men in the front. And it talks about his time there, 2 years. Now, one of the voyages that they took was from the East Coast, probably, I'm thinking Baltimore, all the way to the West Coast of the US, which today would, put you would go through the Panama Canal. But let's just look at my handy dandy globe here. And what this meant at that time was, if he was to say he was in Philadelphia or Boston or something like that, that he would have to sail down and then down and then down this way and then down and then down all the way to here, cross the Cape Horn, and then all the way back up again to here. And I believe that where he came was Mexico at the time, though it's the United States. So, if you took it this way, you could just come across, although that wasn't that easy at the time either. These days, you come down and you just come through the Panama Canal. But he didn't have that luxury. He had to do a lot of sailing, and it took a long time, and the seas are very rough and cold down here, and then you get back up into the tropics and back up to here. Okay, so this, he talks about the entire voyage. It's really fascinating. He talks about the different captains, some of whom were brutal. The captain had absolute authority over everything. He talks about he seems ahead of his time when he talks about the native people that he met and the Mexican people. He is educated and thoughtful, and I'm sure that he had his biases like everyone else, but he at least hid them well in his writing. And it's really it's interesting as this book was successful even in its time, just as a story of what it was like. But it's especially interesting now, I think, because it's not like that anymore for a lot of it. But there's still a deep human element to this, even if you're not interested in the history of it. So really fascinating read, really very interesting. And this particular edition comes from the Harvard Classics.